And now, we're going to moving on to the next part of our presentation. We're delighted again to have Mr. Richard Morin, the Chief Executive of the Pakistan Stock Exchange, as our chief guest. Mr. Morin is a seasoned financial markets executive. He's got more than 30 years of experience across various emerging markets, as well as in Canada. Throughout his professional career, Mr. Morin has contributed in various segments of financial markets, including, but not limited to, formulation of securities markets regulation, derivative markets, central depositories, and clearing systems. Mr. Morin earned his bachelor's from the University of Montreal and his MBA from McGill. Mr. Morin, thank you again for joining us, and could you please come up on stage and share your thoughts?
Thank you very much to you all, and it's a pleasure to be invited by the CFA Society of Karachi, or is it Pakistan? Of Pakistan. I'm terribly sorry. I haven't had the privilege of hearing the first four teams. I am sure that they were just as good as the fifth team that I've had a chance to hear. And I'd like to congratulate you, especially on your courage. Very few investment analysts write sell recommendations anywhere around the world. But even fewer analysts make a sell recommendation when a senior officer of the company is in the attendance. So that shows a lot of courage on your part. The second thing I would say about that, and here I think it connects to ASCOIL, I'll tell you a story of a company based in my hometown, Montreal. It's got a funny name. It's a French name. It's called Alimentation Couche-Tard. It started as a convenience store operation. It had a few stores, a few convenience stores, pretty much like your ASMart initiative. It made an initial public offering on the Montreal Exchange, I forget when, a number of years ago. Today, and let me look at the numbers. Today, that small convenience store operator has 15,000 outlets on 4 different continents, employs 120,000 people, and makes about $4 billion a year in profit. So before you sell ASCOIL, I would really think twice if I were in your shoes. I think that I'm no financial analyst, but I think your ASMart initiative has a lot of potential. And I would encourage you to analyze Alimentation Couche-Tard. If you'd like to meet with them, I'd be pleased to introduce you. I started my day today with an address at PSX. I was invited by UN Women and Women on Board to talk on the occasion of the International Women's Day. I look at the audience tonight. There's a fair number of women in the audience, but I think there's still room for a lot of improvement. And I sincerely hope that many of you will decide to have a career in financial markets, and that maybe some of you will work at PSX. When I was your age, after my bachelor in economics, I had to make a choice between CFA and MBA. I wanted 3 letters. I picked MBA. Sometimes I wonder what my career would have been like if I had done a CFA rather than an MBA. But I can tell you one thing, however, I don't regret any of the things I've had the privilege to do during my career. And I think managing stock exchanges, for an economist like me, it truly is a privilege. I've had a great career in Montreal, in Mauritius, in West Africa, and now I've got the privilege of leading a very important national institution in one of the greatest countries in the world. So I'm very grateful for that, and I will do my best, along with our board, with all the stakeholders, to unlock the development potential of Pakistan's capital market. for the benefit of issuers, for the benefit of investors, and for the benefit of the Pakistan economy as a whole. If I may make a comment, I think Pakistanis, if you read the newspapers, you look like a somewhat pessimistic bunch. In fact, I've decided to stop reading the newspapers in Pakistan. It talks about you know, murders, politics are incredibly complicated, and what I'd like to do today is look on the bright side of Pakistan, and I'd like to use the summary of your proceedings of the November CFA conference as a starting point, and I'd like to comment on some of the things that I find in there. And because it talks about the capital markets, where we are today, what are the problems, challenges, and difficulties. And I'd like to offer my point of view. On page, I believe it's on page 2, first thing it says is there are too few investors in Pakistan. First, I couldn't agree more. 250,000 investors in Pakistan, that's 0.1% of the population investing on PSX in the stock market. I'll politely qualify that as a good start. But just to give you an order of a comparison, Bangladesh, with a slightly smaller population than Pakistan, has 2.5 million active retail investors on its stock market. India has 25 million retail investors. So a pessimist would say, we only have 250,000 investors in Pakistan. What I see is a tremendous opportunity to develop this market. If I was Ascoil, if Ascoil looked at this, they'd say, wow, this is a great opportunity to develop a market. And I think as CFA students, that's the way you should be looking at it. There are 40 million middle-class Pakistanis, most of which should be investing on the stock market. It will be your job to make sure that these people invest in the stock market. So too few investors, too few stocks, to companies that hesitate to list on the stock market. I would offer Ascoil as an example of what the capital market can bring to a company in terms of growth opportunities. And what else does it say here? Oh yes, it says that in Pakistan, 5,000 investors account for 90% of the volume in 30 stocks. Yeah, it's great. We love to have active investors. The fact that the volume is concentrated on a small number of stocks is no different than any other emerging or developed market. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what's missing in Pakistan, again, is not a larger number of active investors. We like active investors. We hope to get more, and we hope they make money trading on the stock exchange. But what will truly transform this capital market, again, is long-term investors. Not active traders, but long-term investors. 40 million middle-class Pakistanis must invest on the stock market. And they won't be active investors. They'll be long-term investors. And that should tell you a little bit about what you as CFA students should consider as the future business model. And I tell that to the member firms, the brokerage houses in Pakistan. A business model based on trading commission is a business model of the past. And increasingly, brokers in Pakistan will come to understand that. The future of capital market lies in wealth management. The 40 million, again, the 40 million middle-class Pakistanis, what they expect from you is not to try to convince them to trade actively on the stock exchange. What they expect from you is wealth management advice. How do they organize their finance? If you're looking for a growth sector in capital market in the future, I would suggest that you consider wealth management, as opposed, again, to stockbroking, executing a transaction on the stock exchange. Another conclusion about this, they said that in the good old days of Pakistan Stock Exchange, the turnover ratio was 300% a year. So the 85 billion market cap of PSX would turn over 3 times a year. That might have been the good old days of PSX, but I don't think it's a sustainable number, and I don't think this is what we should be aiming for. The average emerging markets has a turnover ratio of 40%, not 300%, 40%. The average developed market has 55% turnover ratio. So in Pakistan, the problem is not that people don't trade our shares enough. The problem is that, again, we don't have enough people buying shares listed on the stock market. So what will happen the day that these 40 million middle-class Pakistanis start buying shares? And sorry for those who write sell recommendations, the price of shares on PSX will go up. Multiples will go up. Today we trade at under 9 times earnings on PSX. The average price-earnings ratio in emerging markets is 16 times. Next door in India, it's 12 times. So let's assume that Pakistanis start buying stocks. Multiples go from 9 to 12. What will happen? Well, more Ask Oil will look at this market and say, wow, I can sell my shares at 12 times earnings. And if we catch up to the average emerging market price-earnings ratio, it'll be 16. Well, at 16 times earnings, issuers, again, will be tempted to come to do an IPO in Pakistan. So again, I don't think we should be aiming for a turnover ratio of 300% at PSX. I think what we should be aiming for is 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 million middle-class Pakistanis buying our shares, pushing the multiples up, and then we have a sustainable business model for investors, for issuers, and for brokers and money managers. There's a couple of more remarks that have been made here. One of them I fully agree with. This says that taxation is choking this market. It is absolutely true. There are punitive taxes on capital market, including 0.02% transaction tax. I mean, 0.02%. I used to be an international investor. I paid my broker 0.05% of traded value. So your tax in Pakistan is equal to 40% of the entire commission I paid my broker to invest in your market. It makes no sense. It chokes the market. It kills business models. So we at PSX will be lobbying government to eliminate these punitive taxes, and we hope that CFA Society of Pakistan joins us in lobbying government. I mean, let's eliminate taxes, let the market grow. When the market's big enough, then we can think about taxing it. But now's not a time to tax the market. Now's a time to encourage development of Pakistan's capital market. The one last remark I would make about these conclusions, this document concludes, and I agree with that too, that regulation in Pakistan's capital market can look overwhelming at times. I would tend to agree with that. I think Pakistan needs more effective, more efficient, less burdensome regulation of both brokers and listed issuers. The good news is that we have a regulator in Islamabad, SECP, who agrees with you. And I'm very glad to announce that SECP, in collaboration with all the SROs, and we fully agree with that at PSX, the SECP has launched an initiative to replace the regulatory functions of the 4 CROs, CDC and CCP, PSX, and I'm missing one, PMEX, to replace these these SROs regulatory functions with a single self-regulatory organization in Pakistan. So that's CMOIL. And again, we see eye to eye with CCP. In fact, we see eye to eye with the CCP on a number of different issues. We have an excellent relationship with the CCP, and we will build on that relationship to help develop Pakistan's capital market. And the first such initiative, again, is to simplify the regulatory structure in Pakistan and reduce the number of SROs to one. And in the process, reduce the burden on issuers and on brokers who participate in the market. So these are my completely unstructured remarks for you tonight. Again, I thank you very much for having me here tonight. And I hope to see some of you graduate in the financial services industry, and hopefully some of you find your way to PSX. We are a great employer, and we will be looking for bright young minds to help grow our organization in this market. Thank you very much.